My name is Earl Humphrey, and I'm here today to talk to you about the phantom fundamental. A little bit about me. I live about an hour and a half northwest of Chicago on the Illinois-Wisconsin border. I do sales and marketing consulting for information technologies in what I call the Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison technology triangle. I'm interested in learning more about audio production because I like music and audio theater and want to start producing some of my own material. I play guitar and I'm a big fan of the electric blues, so guys like Joe Bonamassa, Eric Clapton, Gary Clark Jr., Buddy Guy. I also like EDM and have been experimenting with a couple of software packages, one called Groovemaker and another one Sony Acid. I want to put together a home studio, and I'm really interested in hearing recommendations for equipment and software. This presentation I'm using a package. It's an add-in package for PowerPoint called Camtasia, and I'm using a Blue Snowball USB microphone. Do you believe in ghosts and magic? Even if you don't believe in ghosts and magic, the phantom fundamental may make you a bit of a believer. A phantom fundamental is kind of an auditory illusion. In other words, a listener hears a sound that is not really present. What? How can I hear something that's not really there? Before I start on the presentation, here are some definitions I'll be using. First one is frequency, that is how fast a sound wave is vibrating. This is where tone comes from. Fundamental frequency, that's the lowest tone in a harmonic series. This is the frequency for which a musical note is named. This is the frequency that can be the phantom fundamental, also known as the missing fundamental. Dominant frequency, the frequency that is most heard. It is a multiple of the fundamental frequency, and it may be an overtone. Overtone is any frequency higher than the fundamental frequency of a sound in harmonic series, the series of tones with frequencies strictly related to one another and to the fundamental tone. In other words, it's the fundamental frequency plus the overtone. This is all from some of the basic stuff that Loden has talked to us about in his presentations. Now, stitching this all together, here's what I came up with as kind of a sort of end result of all this stuff. A harmonic series is the sound or note a musical instrument produces and can be described in terms of the sum of a number of distinct frequencies. The lowest frequency is called the fundamental frequency, and the pitch it produces is used to name the note. But the fundamental frequency is not always the dominant frequency. The dominant frequency is the frequency that is most heard, and it is always a multiple of the fundamental frequency. The dominant frequency is an overtone of the fundamental frequency. Okay, you say, thanks for sharing. So where does the phantom fundamental and the ghosts and the magic come into this story? I've already given you a clue. Let's go back a couple of slides to the one where I stitched the definition together and look at the language. The lowest frequency is called the fundamental frequency, and the pitch it produces is used to name the note. But the fundamental frequency is not always the dominant frequency. The dominant frequency is the frequency that is most heard and is always a multiple of the fundamental frequency. So here's the clue. A frequency we hear may not include the fundamental or lowest frequency. Or another way of thinking about it, when listening to a song, you may not hear full bass frequencies, only the dominant frequencies, which are higher pitched sounds. The fundamental frequency becomes the phantom frequency. Are you with me? Let's bring in the ghost. A low pitch, also known as the pitch of the phantom fundamental, can sometimes be heard when there is no apparent source or component to that frequency. This perception is due to the brain interpreting repetition patterns that are present from the overtones. It's widely accepted that the brain processes the information present in the overtones to calculate the fundamental frequency. In other words, your brain's kind of playing Sherlock Holmes in that it's sort of the overtones are clues, and from that clue your brain draws the conclusion of here's what I should be hearing, but I'm actually not. I struggle to try and come up with sort of how all this gets put together and made into and made some sort of actual sense in terms of being a practical application. And I actually found an interesting piece in Wikipedia. And the concept here, and you can read it from the screen, but I'll read through it for you. This very concept of missing fundamental being reproduced based on the overtones in the tone has been used to create the illusion of bass in sound systems that are not capable of such bass. My sort of story I remember about this is long ago I bought one of my first Sony Walkman, and it had this thing on there called Bass Boost. And I always wondered what that was all about. Well, anyways, what really happens, I did a little research. It found out there's a company in Israel called Waves Audio, and they produced a product called Max Bass, which is a plug-in that allowed users to apply the synthesized harmonics to their audio files. Later on, Waves produced small subwoofers that relied on the missing fundamental concept to give the illusion of low bass. In other words, like the speakers weren't really capable of producing the bass frequency itself, so they add in this algorithm that basically, if you will, tricks your ear into hearing the bass parts. So one example of a popular song that was recorded with Max Bass processing is Lady Marmalade, the 2001 Grammy Award-winning version sung by Christina Aguilera, Little Kim, Maya, and Pink, produced by Missy Elliott. Here's a cool link I found at the PDF, and it's actually to the Max Bass and Wave site, and it's a PDF that kind of explains all this. The bottom line to all this is really quite interesting in that the Max Bass technology provides loudspeaker designers a technique that can help them achieve higher levels of performance under a tight budget. It's kind of techno magic to those of us who are not really acoustic engineers. A little reflection. In putting together this teaching moment, it forced me to dig deeper into understanding some of the mathematical concepts of sound. Although I will likely never actually do the math related to audio production, having a conceptual understanding is going to add context to looking at graphics on things like waveform displays, frequency response curves, and decibel scales. Although all this math and magic is interesting to know, what really matters is knowing how to use the appropriate tools to produce audio content that sounds good.